right. That's a good tune. That works. It is nice. All right. You can start it up. Go for it. Okay. So the conquest of Mexico, we've learned about quite a few Spanish conquistadors. I kind of look back at Cortez as, without a doubt, one of the most important for a variety of reasons. But what makes Cortez so pivotal is that once he successfully conquers the Aztec and then goes on to more conquest to the south into Honduras, he'll go on to publish a bestseller to basically talk about all of his exploits, and other conquistadors are going to follow his pattern of conquest. So a little bit about Cortez. Cortez is going to set out in 1518 from Cuba. He didn't have the consent of the crown. In fact, the guy that had the consent of the crown to take this expedition mysteriously died prior to Cortez taking off. And Cortez heads out 11 ships, a full crew of 500, fresh horses, attack dogs, cannon, harquebuses, all types of armor and weapons. What they're going to do is they're going to hit the Yucatan, the old Mayan country. It's just like full-on pillaging and plundering as they're ripping through the Yucatan. And along the way, Cortez believes that this is divine intervention, like a gift from God. He is going to have two really lucky breaks. Number one, the crew will rescue a Spanish priest who had been a castaway and had been imprisoned by the local natives. And during his imprisonment, he had learned the Mayan language. They will then also obtain a woman known as La Malinche, who spoke both the Mayan language and the Aztec language. So basically, it's this like game of telephone for interpretation, where he'll be able to interpret both the Mayan language in the Yucatan and the Aztec language in Mexico. They're going to land in Veracruz. They establish a province. They put Cortez in charge of the expedition. They're trying to hop through a loophole here because he doesn't want to wind up like Balboa and be executed for treason. The crew attempts to mutiny. His ships are burned, and they're going to now march on Tenochtitlan. Along the way, they start tangling with other tribes, but thanks to the interpretation, their interpreters here, they start to realize that as they're getting deeper into this territory, they're actually interacting with enemy of the Aztec, because all of these surrounding tribes were required to pay tribute to the Aztecs. So now they start picking up allies along the way. When they come into Tenochtitlan in the fall of 1519, Montezuma, the Aztec chief, is going to greet them with lavish gifts, allow them to stay in living quarters, and he'll bring Cortez and the interpreters into his capital, and will basically host a meeting with Cortez, some of his captains, La Malinche, and the Spanish castaway. All the while, Cortez knows about the chief deity Quetzalcoatl. Montezuma believes Cortez to be Quetzalcoatl, and what Cortez is going to do is he's going to exploit this part of the Aztec culture and religion. Something that I would like for you all to understand is that disease had arrived in central Mexico before Cortez's group ever got there. So disease was already starting to spread around these native cultures. Upon the Spaniards' arrival, though, this is going to really ramp up. So this is a pretty important meeting between Cortez, La Malinche, and Montezuma on November 8th. A few days later, or like a week later, on November 14, Cortez receives word that there's a group coming from Cuba to arrest him for treason. And he knows that if he doesn't stop this and he's apprehended and arrested, he's probably going to be what? Executed, right? So he meets with Montezuma again and basically says, I'm leaving my guys here and my allies. I'm going to go deal with this and I'll be back. Well, he goes to deal with it. He not only squashes the group that was set out to apprehend him, but he actually brings those people with him, and now he has reinforcements. All right? So when he returns, things have now gotten very tense between the Spaniards, their allies, and the Aztec during Cortez's absence. There's actually a really pivotal moment here, and that is when the Spaniards are going to erect a cross on the largest temple in the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. This creates a lot of conflict culturally between the Aztec and the Spaniards. So with this all becoming more tense, the Spaniards decide, all right, we're gonna create some chaos here. We're starting to get attacked. The tribute and the gifts are now coming to a stop. So they wait on this big celebration to occur, celebrating the nobility in the capital. And when they have this celebration in the capital, the Spaniards and their allies surround them and they wipe out almost all of the nobility and they capture Montezuma and hold Montezuma prisoner. Now there's not only warfare against the Spanish in the capital, there's also now civil unrest because Montezuma's he's a prisoner to the Spaniards. What do? Do they continue on with Montezuma? Do they go with his brother? What's the move? Well, Montezuma will address his people. This is conflicting. We don't really know what happened because the Spaniards claim that Montezuma was killed by his own people because they threw rocks at him. Then the Aztec claim that Montezuma was actually strangled by the Spaniards after the fact. But now Montezuma's dead. His brother is now going to come into power. But while all this is going down, smallpox is spreading throughout Tenochtitlan. All right? And the Aztec are going to plan this massive counter-assault in the early summer of 1520. It's called La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. Do I have any art history lovers in here? Nobody? Oh, cool. A few of you. Where are my art people at? Okay. I've got a very famous piece of art to show you in relation to La Noche Triste. So, following La Noche Triste, Cortez and what was left of his army are pushed out of Tenochtitlan. They're going to fall back outside of the city on the mainland, outside of Lake Texcoco, and they're going to reorganize. What they decide they're going to do is with their allies that have survived and other allies that have decided to join the fight, they are going to lay siege to the city. What do I mean by a siege? Okay. How so? What if we were to lay siege? Or let's use ourselves as an example. Let's say that all of us in this room, we are our own empire enemies come in, we push them out, and they lay siege to our city here. Okay, they definitely used fire. But what they are going to do if they were to lay siege to us, they would completely surround us. There would be no way to get out over there. There would be no way to get out over there, nor would there be any way for anything to come in. Basically, what they're going to just try to do is starve them, okay? With continuous attacks. Who said fires? And constantly setting fires, filling in the canals and causeways with and trying to like rip apart the Chinampas. They're just slowly trying to rip the city apart bit by bit with these small, different like strategic attacks around the city. All the while this is happening in the city, not only are the people starving, but smallpox has taken out about 40% of the capital, including Montezuma's brother. So this siege lasts quite a while. This is like a year-long ordeal. And by the summer of 1521, a year later, due to smallpox and the fires and the destruction of the Chinampas and the destruction of the canals and the causeways, Tenochtitlan will fall and everything in the city will be leveled. The architecture, the temples, the artwork, all that, it's just totally wiped out and replaced with Spanish-style architecture, cathedrals, missions, university, government buildings, Spanish-style dwellings, all right? And as I mentioned before, what makes Cortez so interesting is that he not only successfully conquers the Aztec and continues his conquest into Honduras, he writes about it, and it gets published. But it's not like the Mayan or the Aztec or the Olmec or any of the native culture of Latin America is lost, right? Because immediately we start to see the interwoven, blended, melting pot culture of the old world and the new world, right? And we still see this in Latin America, especially in Mexico today, with the Aztec and the Spanish culture intertwined, all right? Interestingly enough, and a bit scandalous, Cortez has a family back in Spain. But he and his interpreter, La Malinche, they become romantically involved, and they have a child, Martin, who becomes one of the first mestizo children born in the New World, at least recorded. Obviously, they were mestizo children born before Martin. Questions up to this point? So, on the left, the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. Remember, this was the deity god in the Mayan culture, Kukulkan. In the Aztec culture, Quetzalcoatl was the chief of the deities. Over on the right, we have Cortez and Montezuma, and below, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. All right, this is a very famous piece of artwork. This is the painting of La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. All right, so the spread of Spanish America. Spanish colonies grew with settlements, cathedrals, missions, commercial centers, universities. The oldest universities in the Americas are going to be Mexico City and Lima, Peru. You guys, okay? Yeah. All right. These universities predate the English universities that will be established in the continental, what will become the British colonies and later the continental U.S. So these colleges predate Harvard and William and Mary and Yale. Spanish conquest, though, also led to rivalry. For example, England will hire Italian explorer Giovanni Caboto, better known to us as John Cabot, to explore. We're going to talk more about him when we get into lesson 2. France will hire Giovanni de Verrazzano, Italian explorer. We're going to talk about him here momentarily. And Jacques Cartier, who was a French explorer that we're going to talk about in more detail here shortly in the lesson. Father Bartolome de las Casas was a missionary and the author of a short account of the destruction of the Indies, where he described the atrocities committed by the Spanish against the indigenous people. This becomes a widely read book throughout Europe. It also starts a propaganda campaign launched by competing countries like Portugal, Britain, and France, and the Dutch, known as the Spanish Black Legend. Basically, where they're like, look at all the horrible things Spain is doing in the New World. We won't do that. Yeah, right. They're going to do that. They're going to follow the same playbook. The Spanish will build the fortress at St. Augustine, Florida. This is the oldest continuous settlement for Spain in the continental U.S. It was built for defense against the French, who had built a fort nearby known as Fort Caroline. They'll successfully defeat the French at Fort Caroline in Florida. This will also later lead to the permanent settlement of Santa Fe, New Mexico. This was the follow-up on Coronado's claims in present-day New Mexico. The guy that will lead this movement of the official conquering of the Pueblo will be Don Juan Oñate, pretty ruthless conquistador who perpetuated the Spanish Black Legend. In fact, the Pueblo are going, now there were large-scale native rebellion against the Spanish dating all the way back to 1493 after Columbus had left and went back to Spain. Native Taino had risen up against Spaniards at Navidad, but the first large-scale confederated type of rebellion that occurred against the Spanish was led by Pope. It looks like it's Pope, but it's Pope. Pope's rebellion was led by a Pueblo shaman. Do you all know what a shaman is? It's like a religious leader. They're going to burn every mission and cathedral throughout New Mexico, kill Spanish settlers. It takes quite a while to put this rebellion down. But once the rebellion is put down, the Spanish are going to go through and just start destroying kivas, which were the religious sites of the Pueblo, and this mission project to build Spanish missions from Texas all the way up through California is really going to take off in the late 1600s and the early 1700s. One of those famous missions you guys have all heard of before. Everybody's heard of the Alamo, right? Remember the Alamo. We often think about the Alamo when we think about the Texas Revolution. The Texas Revolution was not fought until 1836. That mission had been around for over 100 years before the Texas Revolution. All right? Anybody been to San Antonio before? If you ever go down there, it's kind of crazy. The Alamo is in the middle of the city, and they just built everything around it. Also, some of the best Tex-Mex you'll ever have in your life. It'll melt your face off. It's amazing. Another really important person here is Father Junipero Serra. Serra is going to establish a chain of 21 missions along the coast of California. He basically establishes missions from San Diego all the way up to Sonoma. And this gives Spain an even greater foothold culturally and religiously along the coast of California. So, baseball fans in the house, you out there? We're going to talk a lot about not just baseball, but other sports mascots throughout this year and their connection to history. So, the San Diego Padres, the Fathers, is in reference to Junipero Serra and the Franciscan friar monks who established the mission in San Diego. Like the old school mascot of the Padres is a Franciscan monk swinging a bat. So, interesting thing, in your lifetime, Junipero Serra was canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church, but this actually created quite a bit of controversy in the Native American populations out west, because they didn't really feel like Serra deserved that recognition, because those natives had been forced into converting to Catholicism. All right, so if we look at this clockwise, on the top right, we have the fortress at St. Augustine, Florida. How many people have been there before? All right, did you guys visit that fortress? It's pretty amazing. Over here on the right, Junipero Serra. Bottom center, there's the Alamo in San Antonio. On the left, that's Don Juan de Oñate. And then on the top left, that's the University of Lima in Peru. It's the oldest college in South America. All right. Talk a little bit about French exploration in the New World. So the French are looking to compete, and excellent job back here talking about trade routes earlier, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find a northwest trade route all the way up through the northeast. So the first guy they hire is Giovanni de Verrazano. How many of you guys have been to the Outer Banks? All right, been down there, been down to the Carolinas. Verrazano will explore everything from the Carolinas, the Cape Fear River Basin, all the way up to New York Harbor. Anybody been to New York City in here? Okay, you have likely crossed over, but have definitely seen the Verrazano Bridge in New York City. And then he explores even farther north to present-day Massachusetts and Maine. The issue here is that he doesn't find a northwest trade route, and France doesn't really do much to follow up on these land claims. The next guy they hired is a Frenchman by the name of Jacques Cartier. Cartier will go farther to the north. He's going to go above Nova Scotia and Newfoundland into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and down the St. Lawrence Seaway. This is a massive waterway that pretty much today separates the northeastern border between the U.S. and Canada. All right? So, with that being said, he will explore this whole territory, and he comes in contact with a very powerful Native American tribe that dominates much of this region. They're called the Huron. Remember them? Talked about them before. Well, he's trying to communicate with them to figure out where there are people. Basically, the Huron word for settlement was Kantata. So he will claim Canada in honor of France and King Francis I. All right? This guy, though, is extremely important. Hint, hint, wink, wink. He is arguably our most important French explorer, and that is Samuel de Champlain. Champlain is following up on what the two previous guys have done. He explores from the Carolinas all the way up the Atlantic coast into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, all the way down the St. Lawrence Seaway. He establishes the trading post city of Quebec, which then becomes the capital of New France. He goes on to then settle and establish another trading post city farther downriver, or I guess technically farther upriver, if you're thinking about it. And what city would that be? Not far from Quebec. Not Toronto. That's a good guess. Starts with an N. Montreal. Montreal. Have you guys heard of Montreal before? Yeah. So Quebec and Montreal. Quebec becomes the capital of New France. Champlain continues to explore into present-day upstate New York, all the way to the headwaters of the Mississippi, throughout the Great Lakes. The amount of territory that this guy covered by boat and on foot is unbelievable. That is why he is referred to as the father of New France. We're not done with him. We're going to talk more about the French when we move into lesson 5, because the rivalry between England and France is going to ramp up in colonial America. Father Jacques Marquette and explorer Louis Joliet were the first Europeans to explore the Mississippi from the headwaters down to the middle Mississippi, all the way to the lower Mississippi along the border of present-day Louisiana and Arkansas. Have you guys ever heard of the Jesuits before? They're a group of French Catholics. So Marquette was a Jesuit attempting to convert natives to Catholicism. However, much of the crew became ill with disease, and they turned around and went back, and Juliet and part of the crew survived. Marquette did not. This guy is very important. Robert de La Salle. He is a nobleman. He will be hired by King Louis XIV to follow up on Marquette and Juliet's expedition. He will be the first European to explore the entire length of the Mississippi. He will claim all of it, the Mississippi River Valley, in honor of King Louis XIV, the Sun King of the House of Bourbon. And obviously, the Louisiana Territory that he claims in honor of King Louis will be vast. But who are a couple of countries that are also going to have claims to this? Anybody? What couple of countries might have claims to this territory as well? Spain for sure, and also England. All right? Both Spain and England are making claims on this land. So France doesn't find the Northwest Passage. Just doesn't work out, right? They don't understand what we know. They don't understand the Eastern Continental Divide, right? But we know that. Many of us in here have spent some time in Appalachia. We know the Eastern Continental Divide exists. However, they get a serious foothold in the New World. Relations with natives are better. I wouldn't say they're great, they're good. Because the French end up developing relations with natives, and then those relations lead to alliances. So French relations with the Huron and the Algonquian, pretty good. French relations with what tribe? Not so good. Who are those guys? The Iroquois. Very good. So just because you have a good relationship with one group doesn't mean it's going to work out with the other. What did the French want to dominate? They're not finding gold. What type of trade do they want to dominate? Fur. They want to dominate the fur trade. They also want to dominate the timber trade. All right? But the fur trade is their main goal. That's why we see these large movement of fur traders, trappers. Sorry, French students. My French is horrible. But they were the coureurs du bois, the runners of the woods. Is that okay, French students? Not horrible, but not good. The coureurs du bois, the runners of the woods. Another way to cement their alliances intermarry with native women. This was a way to get in better with the tribe. And in many cases, French trappers and traders took multiple wives. Because they were like the two of the main cultures that they allied with took multiple wives, both the Algonquian and the Huron. Most trappers and traders only took maybe 1, 2, sometimes maybe 3 wives, but usually it was 1 or 2. But like when you think about an Algonquian chief like Powhatan, how many wives did Powhatan have? A lot, yeah. Maybe want to take a wild guess? 10 is a good guess. Somebody said 70? He had over 40 wives. Probably about 45 to 46 wives Powhatan had. So that was pretty normal in their culture. So we have on the top left Verrazano, top center Cartier, top right Champlain, bottom left LaSalle, center Father Marquette, bottom right Louis Joliet. Joliet ended up going on to like train future explorers and fur trappers and traders. All right, this is where we wrap up today. How am I looking over there?
3 minutes, 47 seconds.
Beautiful. Love it. Okay, so the Dutch, they don't get their independence back until the late 1500s. After they become allies with England, did you all remember learning about Spanish control of Holland last year? Okay, so when they regain control of their independence, they are going to get on the joint stock company scene like none other. They established the British East India Company. Somebody back here said spice. That's what they want to get into. And they want to compete against Portugal. So the majority of the Dutch exploration venture was revolved around spice trade early on. But by the early 1600s, the Dutch East India Company had their sights set west. And that's when they're going to hire Henry Hudson. Hudson, explorer, ship captain, sets out to find the Northwest Passage for the Dutch. He will land where Verrazano had landed before in New York Harbor. He will explore the river that now bears his name, the Hudson, but there's no Northwest Passage because there's an Eastern Continental Divide. He'll turn back. He will take a follow-up voyage to go farther north above Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence into the bay that now bears his name, Hudson's Bay. But what's the temperature like up there? It is freezing. So they get up there, and it's such a large body of water, he thinks he's in a new ocean. But his crews had enough due to the weather, and they mutiny, leaving him, his son, and his loyal followers in a rowboat in the bay, and they head back to Holland. And that's the last we see of Henry Hudson. But this leads to a Dutch footprint in the New World, because the Dutch are going to create a sister company to the Dutch East India Company called the Dutch West India Company, and their foothold will be in present-day New York with the settlement of New Amsterdam. All right? And we're going to learn more about that when we head into lesson 3. We'll be talking about Dutch settlement. So, top left, we have Henry Hudson. Top right, original sketch of New Amsterdam. And then we have Hudson's crew's mutiny here in the Hudson Bay in 1611. So, to give you a good idea of what's what, everything that is in green here belongs to Spain during the age of colonization. Everything that's in that like peach color belongs to Portugal, Everything in blue is French. Everything in red is British. Yes, Russia gets on the scene. They have claims in Alaska and along the west coast of British Columbia, not yet British Columbia. We'll talk more about that as we move deeper into the semester. The Caribbean's a little tricky because it's hard to see all the different shades of color in there because there is Spanish and Portuguese and British and Dutch and French. Everybody's got a foothold in that region.
All right.
So, questions for me? Anything at all? Yeah.
Can you keep this up so that?
Yeah, no problem. Not a problem at all. But yeah, and another thing to think about with the Caribbean is that not only do you have different countries laying claims to different parts of the Caribbean, but you also have the rise of what going on during this period of time? Piracy. So the pirates are going to create quite a stir in the region as well.
Why do the Dutch control only such an amount, like a small amount?
Because the Dutch East India Company's main focus was on in the Indochina.
Okay.
They were competing for the spice trade. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but like Dutch control of New Amsterdam and New Netherland, that was only from 1624 to 1664. That's only like a 40-year period. And then they're like, yeah, we're just not making enough money. Now, they don't lose, they try to maintain control in the Caribbean and in South America because what other rich resource is coming out of that region? Sugar. Yes. And we're going to talk about sugar because what beverage requires a great deal of sugar? You're on the right track. Booze, liquor, wine, beer. All alcohol requires a lot of sugar, and everybody wants to dominate that sugar trade. Excellent. All right. Is everybody good? All right, cool. Good job. Good job out there. Yeah.